The kingdom of Aurelius glimmered like molten gold beneath the late summer sun. Its capital was preparing for the Festival of Lanterns, a celebration of joy and remembrance when villages filled the streets with silk banners, painted drums, and hundreds of glowing paper lanterns. It was a night of laughter, of music, and of whispered wishes sent into the sky. Prince Evan of the North, heir to a throne of steel and frost, sat inside a lacquered carriage as the wheels creaked over cobbled stone. His platinum blonde hair, impossibly long and smooth, cascaded down to his waist, tied back with a dragon-shaped pin that caught the fading light. His expression, as always, was carved from ice. For years, Evan had carried the weight of his kingdom with a steady, unflinching hand. He did not allow himself indulgence in frivolous joys. His reputation was that of a cold and disciplined prince who placed duty above desire. Love, in his mind, was a luxury reserved for poets, not rulers. Yet tonight, for reasons even he could not name, Evan had ordered his guards to bring him here, to the capital square. Not as a prince, but as a traveler, his royal crest hidden, his attire changed into a dark midnight robe stitched with only the barest gold trim. Only Sir Aldrich, his most trusted knight, knew the truth of his identity. When the carriage halted, Evan stepped out into the noise and color of the festival. The air smelled of roasted chestnuts, honeyed cakes, and the faint perfume of blooming jasmine. Lantern strings swayed overhead, merchants shouted their wares, and children raced by with painted fox masks. "Your Highness," Sir Aldrich murmured as he followed, his voice low. "Are you certain of this? If the crowds recognize you—" "They will not," Evan said, his voice cool, assured. "And if they do, they will find only a traveler passing through." He pulled his hood just low enough to shadow his features. His silver-gray eyes, sharp and unyielding, scanned the crowd as he walked. He disliked noise and gatherings, yet there was something about tonight, some unspoken pull in his chest. As twilight deepened, lanterns began to bloom across the square, flickering to life like stars caught in paper cages. Evan found himself slowing near the fountain in the center of the square. And then, he froze. Beneath the soft glow of dozens of lanterns stood a figure unlike any other. The young man's hair shimmered pale pink, cascading in silken waves all the way to his waist. It was tied delicately with a silver pin shaped like a lotus, gleaming in the warm light. His robes, ivory with rose-colored trim, fluttered gently with each summer breeze. His face, refined yet soft, carried a maturity that did not diminish his beauty. Long lashes framed aquamarine eyes, and his lips curved with the faintest smile as he spoke kindly to a child clutching a broken lantern. When the lantern was mended and floated skyward once more, the crowd cheered. The pink-haired man looked up, eyes shining, his serene expression touched by moonlight. Something inside Evan shifted. His heartbeat, steady as a war drum for years, faltered. He clenched his jaw, unsettled by the warmth spreading in his chest. "What is this?" "Do you know him, sire?" Aldrich asked quietly, noticing his prince's pause. "No," Evan said shortly, and yet his gaze lingered. "But I cannot look away." The music of the festival swelled, drums, flutes, laughter, but it seemed distant, muted. Against his better judgment, Evan circled closer. The pink-haired stranger stood now at a stall of painted fans. Evan approached, his cold composure intact even as something inside him wavered. "You choose carefully," he said quietly, nodding toward the fans. The stranger turned, startled, then smiled faintly. "Beauty lies not in the paint," he replied, his voice low and melodic, "but in the hands that hold it." His aquamarine eyes studied Evan with frank curiosity. "You are not from this village, are you?" "Merely a traveler," Evan said, hiding his name. "Then welcome," the stranger said warmly. He extended a hand. "I am Arian." Evan hesitated only a breath before taking it. His palm, calloused from sword practice, pressed against Arian's slender, elegant fingers. The contact sent a strange current through him, unsettling, yet intoxicating. "I am Evan," he said. Their hands lingered. Arian's smile softened, He pointed toward the drifting lanterns above them. "Will you make a wish?" he asked. "They say if your heart is true, the lantern carries it to the heavens." "I do not believe in such tales," Evan replied, voice steady, expression unreadable. Arian tilted his head, lashes lowering. "Perhaps not, but sometimes a tale only waits for someone willing to live it." For reasons he could not explain, those words cut through Evan's armor. They walked the square together, speaking in fragments that grew into steady conversation. Arian spoke easily, of flowers that bloomed only at night, of stories told by wandering singers, of the joy found in fleeting laughter. Evan listened, offering short replies at first, until he found himself answering more fully. Each word he gave felt dangerous, like lowering a shield, and yet strangely liberating. When fireworks blossomed in the sky, Arian's aquamarine eyes reflected every burst of red and gold. Evan, who rarely allowed himself distraction, found his chest tightening again at the sight. The final spark faded into smoke. The crowd began to disperse. Evan spoke before he could stop himself. "Allow me to walk you home." Arian blinked, surprised, but then inclined his head. "If you wish." They strolled beneath quieter lanterns. The cobblestones echoed softly underfoot. Their robes brushed as they walked close, yet neither stepped away. Evan, usually silent, found the night strangely fragile, as though each word mattered. "Do you often travel?" Arian asked gently. "Too often," Evan answered, "but rarely with purpose." He stopped before saying more. "And tonight?" Evan turned his gaze upon him, the truth pressing against his tongue. "Tonight, I found you." Instead, he murmured, "Tonight feels different." Arian's lips curved. Then perhaps it was meant to be. At last, they reached the gate of a quiet villa. Arian stopped, turning to him. "This is where I stay. Thank you, Evan." Evan inclined his head. "The thanks is mine." Silence lingered, filled by the hush of the summer wind. Arian's aquamarine gaze held his steadily, unafraid, warm. Evan felt his composure waver, his cold mask cracking ever so slightly. "Perhaps," he said slowly, his voice softer than he intended. "We will meet again. I would like that," Arian replied without hesitation. Evan turned away then, forcing his long strides to carry him into the shadows. His fingers brushed the dragon pin in his hair, his chest tight with an unfamiliar weight. For the first time in years, Prince Evan, cold, disciplined, unyielding, had felt the stir of something he had once scorned. Not duty, not ambition, love, and it terrified him. The morning after the Festival of Lanterns, Prince Evan should have been back in the Northern Palace, buried in reports of border patrols and trade treaties. Instead, he lingered in Arelis. The taste of last night remained like an unshakable dream. He told himself it was curiosity, nothing more. Yet he found his thoughts returning again and again to Arian's soft laugh, his eyes glimmering beneath fireworks, the warmth of his hand when they shook. Evan had never been haunted by a single evening before. By midday, he dismissed his guards and left his inn disguised once again in a traveler's robe. His platinum blonde hair was bound simply with a plain cord, though its shimmering length was impossible to fully hide. He told himself he was simply walking through the market to observe. But deep down, he knew what he was searching for. And there, among rows of silk stalls and fruit sellers, he saw him. Arian stood before a flower vendor, cradling a small pot of pale lilies. The summer breeze caught the ends of his ivory robe, making him seem almost otherworldly. Evan hesitated. He had faced generals, scholars, even assassins with steady calm. Yet in that moment, his steps faltered. Before he could gather his composure, Arian noticed him. Surprise flashed across his delicate face, followed by a gentle smile. "Evan," he greeted, as though it were natural for them to meet again. "I wondered if the festival would be the last time we crossed paths." "Perhaps fate had other intentions," Evan replied evenly, though his chest tightened at the ease with which his name left Arian's lips. Arian tilted his head. Do you believe in fate? I believe in choices, Evan said after a pause. But sometimes, they are difficult to explain. Arian chuckled softly, his lashes lowering. That sounds like fate to me. They strolled together through the market, weaving between vendors and townsfolk. Children tugged at their parents' sleeves for sweets. Minstrels strummed lutes beneath shaded corners. Everywhere around them bustled with life, yet to Evan, the world seemed strangely narrowed to the figure beside him. You walk with a soldier's posture, Arian observed as they paused at a stall of jeweled combs. Straight, alert, always searching the corners, not the stance of an ordinary traveler. Evan's expression did not shift. Observation suits you. And secrecy suits you even better, Arian said lightly, though his gaze was sharper now, curious. But I will not press. If you have a name and a presence, that is enough. No one had ever spoken to Evan so simply, without demanding more. It unsettled him, yet it also stirred something warmer. Later, they sat in a shaded pavilion overlooking the river. The sunlight danced on the rippling water, scattering golden reflections onto Arian's pale skin. He unwrapped a paper parcel of pastries and offered one to Evan. You did not eat at the festival yesterday, Arian said. Try this. Evan accepted the sweet cake reluctantly. He was not accustomed to being served. People usually bowed or trembled in his presence. But Arian pressed it into his hand as though they were equals. The flavor was unfamiliar. Honey and almond, soft against his tongue. Evan chewed in silence. You don't like it? Arian asked, tilting his head. Evan swallowed. It is different. Different can be good, Arian said with a smile. Sometimes the things that unsettle us are the things we need most. Evan found himself watching the way sunlight caught in Arian's pink hair, the way his long lashes brushed his cheeks when he looked down. His words sank deep, pulling at walls Evan had built for years. After a quiet moment, Evan asked, And you? Do you live in this village? Not exactly, Arian answered softly. I travel often between places. My family belongs elsewhere. There was weight in his tone, a meaning carefully veiled. Evan noted it, but chose not to pry. He himself was hiding truths. For now it felt enough to walk alongside this man and share the silence. The hours slipped by unnoticed. Afternoon melted into dusk. Lanterns began to glow along the riverbank. When they rose to leave, a group of young men approached the pavilion. Their attire marked them as nobles, though their laughter was loud and careless. At their center strode Lord Davin, son of a minor duke, known for his arrogance. Well, if it isn't our gentle visitor, Davin said mockingly, his gaze sweeping over Arian. You honor the festival again tonight. Surely one such as you deserves finer company than... He cast a dismissive glance at Evan's plain robe. A wandering stranger. Arian's polite smile remained, though a hint of frost touched his eyes. Lord Davin, I thank you, but I am already in company I value. Davin's smile twisted. Is that so? Then perhaps I should test if this stranger is worthy of standing beside you. He stepped closer, his tone laced with challenge. Before Arian could answer, Evan moved. His stance shifted subtly, the air around him sharp as steel. Though he spoke softly, his words cut like ice. Step back. Davin blinked at the authority in his tone, surprised by the cold edge of command. He scoffed but retreated a step, unsettled by the sheer force in Evan's gaze. Arian glanced at Evan, surprise flickering in his aquamarine eyes. Then his lips curved, almost amused. Protective, are you? Evan said nothing. His silence spoke more than words. Davin muttered something under his breath and led his companions away. Only when they disappeared into the crowd did the tension ease. Arian regarded Evan quietly. You carry yourself not as a traveler, but as someone trained to protect. Evan looked away. Old habits. Perhaps, Arian murmured. His eyes softened, though curiosity lingered. Still, I am grateful. They walked again along the lantern-lit river. The confrontation had left a quiet energy between them, fragile but charged. At Arian's villa gate, he paused. The evening air was heavy with the fragrance of night jasmine. "You are an unusual man, Evan," he said softly. "Cold on the surface, but with warmth hidden deeper. I cannot quite read you." Evan's chest tightened. He wanted to tell him everything, his true name, his station, the throne that chained him. But the words remained locked behind years of restraint. Instead, he said, "Perhaps one day you will." Their gazes held in the lantern glow. For a moment, neither moved. The silence between them felt intimate, like a secret shared only by the night. At last, Arian smiled gently. "Then let us meet again tomorrow." Evan inclined his head, his voice quiet. "Tomorrow, then." As he walked away into the shadows, Evan felt the strange weight again in his chest, both terrifying and exhilarating. For the first time, he wanted tomorrow to come swiftly, not for duty, not for power, but for the chance to see Arian again. And somewhere deep inside, the cold walls he had built began to crack. The palace gardens of Lysandra were alive with fragrance. Lanterns swayed in the dusk breeze, blossoms drifted onto marble benches, and the fountains caught the last rays of sunset. Arian dismissed his guards with a kind gesture, longing for air untainted by ceremony. He turned a corner and nearly collided with the knight who had shadowed him since the festival. "Forgive me," Arian said, steadying himself. Evan inclined his head with practiced elegance, a gesture almost too polished for a soldier. "You walk alone again, Your Highness. The palace is not without shadows." Arian studied him curiously. "And yet, somehow, you are always near, like you knew I would be here." "Perhaps I did," Evan replied, his voice low and even. They sat beside the fountain, water glimmering with lantern light. Arian leaned forward slightly. "Tell me something, Evan. You live by duty. But do you never wish to set it aside, even for an hour?" The question unsettled him. Evan's gaze dropped to the drifting petals. "Wishing leads to carelessness. And yet wishing makes life warm," Arian said gently. "What do you wish for?" For once, Evan hesitated, then quieter than before. "I wish I could trust what stands before me, without suspicion." Arian smiled faintly. "Then trust me tonight. I am only Arian. No crown, no court. Just a man beside you." Evan's composure wavered. He had been trained to read strategies, lies, veiled meanings, but here was honesty so simple it disarmed him. "You make it sound easy," he murmured. "It can be," Arian said, "if you allow it." Silence stretched. Then Arian whispered, almost wistful, "Do you know what I envy?" Evan raised a brow. "A prince? Envious?" "Yes." Arian's gaze drifted past the gates toward faint laughter of villagers. "They love whom they wish, speak freely, and sleep without crowns pressing on them. My days are bound by duty, my nights often lonely." Something shifted in Evan's eyes, though his face stayed composed. His voice was gentler than before. "You are not as alone as you think." Arian turned to him, searching. "Then why do you stay close? Is it only duty?" The mask nearly cracked. Evan's words came slower, unguarded. "I stay because when you speak, I listen. And when you walk into a room, I find myself watching." Arian's lips curved softly. "That sounds less like duty and more like affection." Evan stiffened, a faint flush betraying him. "Call it admiration." The word lingered. Arian tilted his head, his tone warm. "Admiration is a seed. With care, it grows into something greater." Evan gave a quiet breath, almost a laugh. "You speak like a poet." "Or perhaps," Arian countered, "like someone unafraid of truth." The wind stirred the blossoms. One drifted onto Evan's shoulder. He brushed it away with a graceful motion, too refined for a mere soldier. Arian noticed, filing the detail away with quiet curiosity. Evan rose, offering his hand. "It grows late. Let me take you back before the court whispers." Arian hesitated, then placed his hand in Evan's. The knight's grip was firm, yet careful, guiding him up with gentleness that belied his cold exterior. As they walked back, Arian glanced at him from the corner of his eye. There was something in the way Evan carried himself, his poise too noble, his words too measured. But for now, he said nothing. For now, it was enough that the silence between them felt alive with something unspoken, fragile, and new. The great hall of Lysandra was alive with celebration. 100 lanterns floated above the long tables, casting warm light on golden platters and jeweled goblets. Musicians played soft melodies while courtiers in silk robes whispered about alliances and fortunes. Arian entered with quiet grace, his robe of silver-threaded blue trailing behind him. He had always been the gentlest presence in a room, yet tonight eyes followed him more than usual. His long, pale pink hair was tied high with a prince's pin, and when he smiled politely to the nobles, murmurs stirred like wind through leaves. Evan stood just behind him, dressed in the armor of Lysandra's guard. Though he wore the plain crest of service, his posture carried an elegance the other knights lacked. His cold expression never shifted, but his eyes traced every gaze that lingered too long on the prince. "Your Highness." The voice belonged to Lord Sarys, a young noble from a distant province. He bowed deeply before Arian, his dark cloak sweeping the polished floor. "Your presence graces the hall brighter than the lanterns themselves." Arian smiled politely. "You honor me with your words." Sarys offered his arm. "May I guide you to the feast?" Before Arian could reply, Evan stepped forward with a subtle bow. "The prince has already asked me to accompany him, my lord." His tone was respectful, but his pale eyes were sharp as steel. Sarys hesitated, then laughed lightly. "Ah, so even the knights of Lysandra have a touch of jealousy." Arian glanced between them, a flicker of amusement in his gaze. "Gentlemen, the food awaits. Let us not quarrel over something so simple." They moved toward the banquet table. Sarys took the seat on Arian's left, while Evan stood silently at his right, as if guarding more than just his safety. As the feast unfolded, Arian spoke graciously to his neighbors, accepting compliments with practiced ease. Yet every time Sarys leaned too close, Evan's jaw tightened. When the lord poured wine into Arian's goblet with his own hand, Evan's gloved fist curled at his side. Arian noticed. His eyes flicked briefly toward Evan, then softened with something like reassurance. Later, when music filled the hall again, Sarys rose and extended a hand. "Would your highness honor us with a dance?" The court fell silent. Arian hesitated. To refuse might be seen as slighting a noble guest. To accept would mean allowing someone else to hold him before the entire hall. Evan's voice broke the silence, calm but edged. "The prince is weary from his travels. Surely he should not be pressed." Sarys arched a brow. "And yet a single dance could not harm him. Unless, of course, he prefers the company of his knight." A ripple of laughter spread through the hall. Arian rose gracefully, his smile composed. "I will dance, my lord, but only once." The music began, and Karis led him to the center of the hall. Courtiers whispered as they moved, the noble guiding Arian with practiced ease. From the side, Evan's eyes never left them. He stood like a statue, but inside his chest, something stirred, an unfamiliar heat that tightened with every turn of the dance. Arian danced beautifully, his robe flowing like water. But at one point his gaze lifted, not at his partner, but at the knight watching silently from the edge of the crowd. Their eyes met for a brief heartbeat. Arian's smile changed, small, private, meant for no one else. Sarys did not notice. But Evan did. When the music ended, Arian bowed politely and stepped back, excusing himself with grace. He returned to his table, and when he passed Evan, he whispered low enough for only him to hear. "Your silence speaks louder than words, Evan." Later that night, when the banquet ended and the hall emptied, Arian walked the lantern-lit corridors with his knight at his side. His expression was thoughtful, touched with quiet amusement. "You do not enjoy banquets, do you?" he asked. "They are distractions," Evan replied curtly. "And yet," Arian said softly, You glared at Lord Saris as if he were an enemy on a battlefield. Evan halted. His mask nearly faltered. He was too close. Arian's steps slowed. His voice dropped lower, more intimate. And why should that trouble you? The corridor was silent except for the flutter of lanterns overhead. Evan met his gaze, his own voice restrained. Because it is not his place. Arian's lips curved into a quiet smile. Then whose place is it? Evan did not answer. His silence was its own confession. They walked on, side by side, the night air heavy with words unspoken. For the first time, Arian felt certain. Beneath the cold armor of his knight, something fragile and dangerous was beginning to burn. The moon rose over Lysandra's palace, casting its glow upon marble paths and carved arches. Courtyards bloomed with lanterns that hung like fallen stars, each flickering light mirrored in polished fountains. Tonight was not a grand festival, but a gathering of musicians and courtiers, an evening of calm where both kingdoms mingled in small groups. Arian leaned against a column, his long, pale pink hair tied neatly with a silver pin. His robes tonight were woven with threads of soft lilac, embroidered with cranes that seemed to move under the lantern light. He watched the guests drifting across the courtyard, nobles trading cautious smiles, envoys speaking of trade and harvest, laughter carefully measured. At his side, Evan stood silent. His platinum hair was bound at his waist with a dark clasp, his robe plain yet dignified, shadows brushing his face to sharpen its edges. He had always carried a colder air, but this evening his expression softened as he followed Arian's gaze. "You seem restless," Evan said, his tone calm, almost unreadable. Arian turned, smiling faintly. Restless? Perhaps. When voices around me carry talk of alliances, it is easy to feel less like a person and more like a bond to be traded. Evan's eyes flickered, a subtle storm hidden within. Do you wish to leave? The gardens beyond are quieter. Before Arian could answer, a voice intruded. Lord Saris, dressed in deep crimson, with a jeweled clasp at his chest, strode toward them with the confidence of a man accustomed to admiration. He bowed with deliberate flourish. Prince Arian, the musicians will soon play the river dance. It would honor me greatly if you shared the floor. Murmurs rose at the suggestion. Saris had made no secret of his pursuit. Arian hesitated, caught in the eyes of many, but before he spoke, Evan's hand brushed his sleeve lightly, not forceful, but enough to steady him. Their eyes met, and for a fleeting moment, the world narrowed to silence. I cannot refuse the tradition, Arian said softly, glancing once at Evan before turning to Saris. Very well, one dance. The musicians struck their strings, notes flowing like river currents. Courtiers parted, forming a circle. Saris led Arian to the center, confidence evident in his posture. He moved with practiced grace, steps meant to impress. Arian followed, polite and precise, but his smile never reached his eyes. Evan remained at the edge, arms folded, gaze fixed. To others he looked indifferent, yet his jaw tightened each time Saris drew too close. Halfway through the song, Arian lifted his chin, as though searching the crowd. His eyes found Evan, and though his lips curved politely at Saris, the warmth of his expression was meant for another. The dance ended with applause, Saris bowing proudly. Arian thanked him with courtesy, then slipped from the circle. Instead of rejoining the courtiers, he walked directly to Evan. You did not seem entertained, Arian teased softly. Evan met his gaze. I do not enjoy performances where the partner is unwilling. Arian tilted his head. You could tell? It was written on your face. The corner of Arian's lips quirked upward. Then perhaps you should show me how such a dance feels when it is not a performance. For the first time that evening, Evan faltered. His composure cracked, just enough for Arian to catch the flicker of surprise. But when the musicians began another melody, Arian extended his hand. Would you? A hush swept the courtyard. A prince offering his hand to a knight. It was not tradition. Yet Evan, after a long breath, placed his hand into Arian's. Their steps began unsteady, Evan less polished in formal dance, but where his movements lacked perfection, they held sincerity, Arian guided gently, their long sleeves brushing like whispers. The courtyard faded. For both, there was only rhythm and breath. Arian leaned closer, his voice low enough that only Evan heard. See, when both wish to be here, even clumsy steps can feel like flight. Evan's lips curved faintly, rare and almost tender. Then I will not let you fall. The music slowed. The final note lingered as the two bowed, yet their eyes did not part until whispers rippled through the crowd. Some looked shocked, others intrigued. Ceres's smile had vanished, replaced by thinly veiled frustration. Nobles exchanged glances, wondering what this meant for alliances. Yet Arian remained unshaken, leading Evan away from the circle into the shadow of an olive tree at the courtyard's edge. "Did I ruin your reputation?" Evan asked, tone quiet. Arian laughed softly, shaking his head. "You may have rescued it. For once, I felt seen not as a prize, but as a partner." Evan studied him, the lantern light catching in his pale eyes. "You speak as though your choice has no weight." "My choice," Arian whispered, "is mine alone. And tonight, I chose to dance with you." The words settled between them like petals drifting on still water. Neither spoke further, but their silence was not empty. It was full, of promise, of questions unspoken, of something neither dared to name, yet both understood. As the night deepened, the music faded, but the memory of that dance burned brighter than any lantern. The palace gardens glowed in the late afternoon light, golden rays falling across terraces of roses, lilies, and winding paths of polished stone. The fountains sang their steady rhythm, a soft accompaniment to the laughter of courtiers, lingering after the previous evening's gathering. Arian sat beneath a carved pavilion, the breeze teasing strands of his long pink hair. His robe today was simple yet elegant, pale ivory with threads of jade at the sleeves. He traced idle circles on the armrest, gaze drifting over the blossoms, though his thoughts wandered elsewhere. Evan approached with his steady stride, carrying a calm presence that unsettled some but soothed Arian. His platinum hair shimmered like frost in sunlight, tied back neatly with a dark pin. He paused at the pavilion steps, inclining his head in quiet respect. "You disappeared after the dance last night," Evan said, voice low. Arian chuckled softly. "I thought it wise to escape the curious stares. And you? You vanished too." "I followed," Evan admitted simply, "to ensure no one troubled you." The words, spoken without hesitation, made warmth rise in Arian's chest. He gestured for Evan to join him. "Then stay a while. The roses do not bite, though their thorns are sharp." As Evan settled beside him, a pair of young courtiers passed along the path, their whispers carrying easily through the quiet. "Strange, isn't it? A prince dancing with his guard." "Perhaps he is merely indulging himself. Still, it makes Lord Ceres furious." Their laughter faded as they moved away, but the sting lingered in the silence left behind. Arian's smile dimmed. "Do you hear how they speak? As though I cannot choose who shares my steps." Evan's jaw tightened, but his tone remained composed. "Let them speak. A truth needs no approval." Before Arian could answer, footsteps approached again. Lord Ceres himself appeared, carrying a vase of white lilies, a gift clearly chosen with intent. His robes shimmered like wine in the sun, every detail proclaiming wealth and pride. "Prince Arian," he said smoothly, bowing low, "I thought these blossoms might brighten your day. They remind me of your grace." Arian rose politely, accepting the flowers with measured courtesy. "You are thoughtful, Lord Ceres." But before more words could be exchanged, Evan stepped slightly forward. His presence, though silent, was unyielding, like a shadow that warned without a sword. Ceres's eyes flicked toward him, narrowing. "A knight should know his place," Ceres said pointedly, lips curling in disdain. Arian's gaze sharpened, his voice firm but calm. "And a guest should mind his courtesy. Evan is here at my request." Ceres froze, caught off guard by the firmness in Arian's tone. His smile faltered, though he quickly bowed again. "Forgive me. My concern was only for your honor, Highness." With that, He left the pavilion, his retreat less graceful than his entrance. Arian sighed, setting the lilies aside. His persistence wearies me. He acts as though affection can be won by parading gifts. Evan looked at him steadily. Does his pursuit trouble you? Arian's lips curved faintly. Not half as much as it troubles you, I think. The remark struck, and for the first time, Evan looked away. His stoic mask faltered just enough to betray a flicker of jealousy. Arian leaned closer, lowering his voice. I saw the way you watched during the dance. Cold, perhaps, to others, but to me, it was fire. Silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken things. The breeze carried the scent of roses, the fountain's song steady as heartbeat. Finally, Evan spoke, his words quiet but certain. I do not trust easily, nor do I offer loyalty without reason. But you unsettle the walls I have carried for years. Arian's breath caught. He turned, meeting Evan's pale eyes, searching the depth of what lay within. Then do not hold your words behind those walls. Let me hear them. Evan's lips parted, but before he could continue, a voice called from across the garden. Prince Arian? It was Queen Celiora, Arian's mother, approaching with her attendants. Her gown shimmered in hues of twilight blue, her hair pinned with jewels that caught the sun. Though regal, her smile was gentle. I have been searching for you, she said warmly. Her gaze shifted to Evan, lingering for a heartbeat. And you must be the knight who has drawn so much attention. Evan bowed deeply, every movement precise. Your Majesty. The queen studied him, her eyes sharp though kind. Then she looked back at her son. Walk with me, Arian. I wish to hear your thoughts about last night. Arian glanced at Evan, a silent exchange passing between them. Then he rose, offering a small smile. Do not vanish this time, he murmured softly. I will be here, Evan promised. As Arian left with his mother, Evan remained at the pavilion, watching until the prince disappeared behind the hedge of roses. His hands tightened at his sides, his expression unreadable to those who passed. But in the quiet corners of his mind, the truth burned clearer than ever. What began as duty was becoming something far more dangerous and far more precious. The halls of Lysandra were hushed that night, their marble walls bathed in the glow of oil lamps. Evan moved alone, the click of his boots echoing softly, each step measured, his thoughts heavier than his stride. He stopped at the open colonnade, gazing over the gardens below. The memory of Arian's words, "Then do not hold your words behind those walls," clung to him like a brand. How could he speak freely? To Arian, he was only a knight sworn to guard him. To reveal the truth, that he was no mere protector but the Prince of Aurelis, would change everything. It might destroy the fragile trust they had built. Yet as much as he tried to bury it, the image of Arian's smile, the warmth in his voice, returned again and again. Each glance, each brush of their sleeves, each stolen silence was undoing years of discipline. Evan. The voice startled him. He turned swiftly, only to find King Renard, Arian's father, standing a short distance away, hands clasped behind his back. His silver hair shimmered under the lantern light, his gaze sharp but not unkind. Your Majesty, Evan said, bowing low. Rise, Renard ordered gently. He walked to the railing, looking out at the moonlit garden. I have been watching. You guard my son with a devotion I do not often see. Evan held his composure. It is my duty. The king's lips curved slightly, not quite a smile. Duty, perhaps, but a man's eyes betray more than he admits. He turned then, meeting Evan's gaze directly. Tell me, do you cherish him? The question cut deep. Evan's chest tightened, words caught on the edge of his tongue. To deny would be safer, to admit would be dangerous. He faltered, for once unsure. Renard raised a hand. You need not answer. I see it clearly. And I will say this. Arian deserves someone who sees him, not merely a prince bound by politics. If that is you, then I will not stand in the way. Evan's breath stilled. He had prepared himself for suspicion, for warning, but not this. Acceptance. Majesty. The king rested a hand on his shoulder. Guard him, not only with your sword, but with your heart. The court may whisper, but what matters is his happiness. And with that, he left, his robes sweeping softly across the marble. Evan stood frozen, the weight of the blessing both liberating and terrifying. Elsewhere in the palace, Arian sat with his mother in a quiet chamber. Queen Celeora poured tea into porcelain cups, the fragrance of jasmine filling the air. Her eyes, bright as dawn, lingered on her son. "You smile differently tonight," she remarked. Arian tilted his head, feigning innocence. "Differently?" "Yes." She passed him a cup, her fingers brushing his lightly. "Not the smile you wear for courtiers, nor the polite one for suitors. This one reached your eyes. Was it because of that night?" Heat crept to Arian's cheeks. He looked down at the steam curling above the cup. "You notice too much, Mother." Celeora chuckled softly. "I notice because I have worn the same smile. Once, when I first looked at your father. Love softens even the strongest masks." Arian's heart fluttered at the word. Love. Was that what this was? The way his chest lightened when Evan's voice broke through silence, the way jealousy sparked when others vied for his attention, the way safety settled around him in Evan's presence. If so, it was already too late to turn away. "He is different," Arian admitted at last. "Cold at first, but not cruel. He listens, even when he says little. And when he looks at me." His voice trailed off, unsure. The queen touched his hand gently. "Then hold on to that. A bond not forged by politics is rare. But remember, the road may not be simple. Hearts can clash harder than swords." Arian smiled faintly. "And yet, worth the wounds." Later that night, Arian wandered into the moonlit garden, robes trailing softly over the grass. Lanterns glowed like stars along the paths. He found Evan where he expected, standing near the fountain, its waters shimmering silver. "You vanish too often," Arian said lightly, though his eyes were warm. "I needed air," Evan replied, though the storm in his voice betrayed deeper thoughts. Arian stepped closer, long hair swaying, the scent of lilies clinging to him. "I spoke with my mother. She asked about you." Evan tensed. "What did you tell her?" "That you are different, that you make me smile." For once, Evan had no reply. The walls he had clung to seemed weaker beneath the weight of those words. Arian studied him quietly. "You carry something, don't you? A truth you keep from me." The question struck deep. Evan's fists tightened at his sides, the urge to confess warring with the fear of losing everything. "I cannot say," he whispered at last. Arian searched his eyes, then nodded gently. "Then I will not force it. But know this, Evan, whatever you hide, it does not change what I feel when you are near." Silence pressed between them, heavy with unsaid truths. Finally, Evan reached out, his hand brushing Arian's sleeve. It was the smallest of touches, yet it carried more weight than 1,000 vows. "Then let me stay by your side," Evan said softly. "Even if I cannot speak all that I wish." Arian's lips curved, eyes shimmering in the moonlight. "Stay then. That is all I ask." The fountain's song filled the silence as they stood together beneath the stars, shadows mingling, hearts moving closer, though secrets still lay between them. The midsummer night of Lysandra glowed beneath the moon. Lanterns swung from poles along the forest road, lighting the royal procession's path back from the temple. The air was warm, yet a strange heaviness lingered, as though the trees whispered warnings. Prince Arian rode in silence, pale pink hair tied neatly with a silver pin, robes flowing like silk touched by starlight. He had laughed during the festival, forgetting the weight of duty, but now his chest felt strangely restless. His gaze slid sideways. Evan rode behind him, platinum hair bound low, his silver-gray robes carrying the insignia of a knight. His eyes swept the shadows, cold and focused, yet when they paused on Arian, The edge softened, almost unnoticeably. "You're quiet," Arian said gently. "I am meant to be," Evan replied, scanning the trees. His tone was low, measured. Before Arian could press further, a sharp whistle cut the night. Then chaos erupted. Figures in dark cloaks burst from the forest, blades flashing. Horses reared, guards shouted, steel clashed. The assassin's target was clear: the royal carriage. "Protect His Highness!" the captain cried. Arian's heart pounded. One attacker lunged at him, but before the blade struck, silver steel intercepted. Evan stood before him, sword drawn. "Stay behind me," Evan ordered. Arian froze. Evan's movements were precise, lethal, every strike flowing like water. But there were too many. "Evan!" he called in alarm. "Do not move," Evan barked, parrying another strike. The air filled with shouts and clashing metal. Arian clutched his robes, feeling useless. How could danger reach them here in Lysandra's heartlands? An assassin broke through, rushing at Arian. For a breath, he was defenseless, until Evan shoved him back, taking the blow on his arm. "The fabric tore. You're hurt," Arian gasped. "Not now," Evan snapped, driving the attacker down. Moments stretched. Then, silence. The last mercenary fled into the woods. Guards pursued, but Evan stayed, chest heaving, sword dripping red. Arian stepped closer, hands trembling. "You could have been killed." Evan sheathed his blade, finally meeting his gaze. His cold mask faltered. "It is my role to protect you." "You're more than that," Arian whispered. The words lingered in the quiet clearing. Moonlight revealed the sharp line of Evan's jaw, the faint softness in his eyes. For once, he looked uncertain. "Why do you risk yourself so recklessly?" Arian asked, voice breaking. Evan's lips parted, then tightened. "Because losing you, He stopped, voice rough. "It is not something I can allow." Arian's breath caught. His heart thundered. "Evan." The danger had stripped away walls. Only the two of them remained in the quiet, bound by what they had almost lost. Evan lowered his hand, trembling. "I shouldn't." Arian touched his wrist gently. "Then don't speak. Just..." Evan leaned in. Their lips met, hesitant, fragile as petals brushing. The world hushed, lanterns flickered, and the forest seemed to still. When Evan pulled back, his voice shook. "Forgive me." Arian, cheeks flushed, shook his head. "Don't ask forgiveness for what my heart has longed for." Evan stared, as if memorizing every detail. Arian's lashes, his trembling lips, his quiet courage. Then he exhaled, surrendering to something greater than duty. "We must return," he said softly. Arian nodded, but his hand lingered on Evan's sleeve. They walked back toward the lantern-lit road, both knowing something had changed. Unseen in the distance, a shadow retreated deeper into the night. The palace of Lysandra glowed in brilliance that evening, its marble floors reflecting 1,000 lantern lights. The midsummer ball had drawn every noble family to the grand hall. Velvet banners bore the crest of King Renard and Queen Celiora, watching with quiet pride as their son stood before his people. Prince Arian moved with serene grace, his long pale pink hair bound in a silver clasp. Every step he took was met with admiration. Every smile drew sighs of devotion. But where he went, a single figure followed, silent, composed, and unflinching. Evan, known to most as only a knight, stood a half-step behind him. His platinum hair gleamed faintly under the chandeliers, his expression unreadable, his posture unwavering. Though his presence lent Arian confidence, it also stirred the court into restless whispering. "Why does the prince keep him so near?" murmured Lady Myrenne behind her fan. "A knight, nothing more, and yet he stands closer than counsel or kin," Lord Harvest scoffed. "He watches as though the hall were a battlefield," another muttered. The music swelled, dancers spun across the floor, yet a current of unease hummed beneath the elegance. Evan felt it, eyes pressing against him, suspicion heavy in the air. Still, His gaze never wavered from Arian, who carried himself with calm dignity despite the whispers. Then Lord Cerys cut through the crowd, his crimson coat gleaming like fresh spilled wine. Tall, sharp-eyed, his presence silenced nearby voices. With a theatrical bow, he addressed the royal family. "Your Majesties," Cerys said, his voice smooth as glass, "Lysandra rejoices that Prince Arian stands safe before us. May the night honor his return." Polite applause followed, but Cerys's words soon curved like blades. His eyes shifted toward Evan, lingering with false courtesy. "And yet," he continued, his tone sharpened, "I cannot help but notice our heir's constant shadow. One night alone, bearing the burden of his protection. Is Lysandra's crown now guarded by secrecy rather than strength?" A ripple of discomfort spread through the hall. Nobles glanced at each other, some frowning, some smirking as though emboldened. Cerys pressed further, his smile cutting. "A knight with no history in court, no proven loyalty to Lysandra's banners. Are we to entrust our jewel's safety to a stranger cloaked in silence?" The insult hung heavy in the air. Some nobles shifted, murmuring agreement. Others stared at Evan with new suspicion. Arian stepped forward, eyes flashing. "Evan has done more for me than any of you here. He has stood where danger was real, where blades were drawn. If I trust him with my life, it is because he has earned that right with every breath." A bold defense, but the hall was restless. Cerys's smirk widened as though victory was within his grasp. "Such loyalty," he said with feigned admiration. "But can loyalty alone prove a man's worth? Can a nameless knight bear the weight of nations? Forgive me, your highness, but Lysandra deserves guardians of true standing, not—" He never finished. Evan's voice cut through the hall, low but resonant, each word carrying like thunder after lightning. "I have endured your scorn in silence, Lord Cerys. But your tongue grows careless." The crowd stiffened. Never before had the knight spoken so openly, so firmly. Evan stepped forward, his gaze sweeping the hall, before settling coldly on Cerys. "You demand my name, then hear it clearly." The music faltered. Dancers froze mid-step. Even King Renard leaned forward, brows lifting. "I am Evan Velthorn," he declared, his voice steady as stone. "Crown Prince of Aurelis, not a nameless knight, not a wandering shadow. I stand here not only as protector of Arian of Lysandra, but as his equal." The hall erupted. Gasps rang like thunderclaps. Fans clattered to the floor. Whispers surged like wildfire. "Prince of Aurelis? All this time? Impossible." Cerys's eyes widened, his composure cracking for the first time. His smirk dissolved into disbelief, his lips parting, but no words forming. Arian's breath caught. Though he had known Evan bore secrets, hearing him speak his true name here, before the hall, sent a rush through him. Fear, pride, and something deeper. King Renard rose from the raised platform, his deep voice steady. "Prince of Aurelis." His gaze lingered on Evan, sharp and weighing. "You stand unannounced in my court, wearing the guise of a knight. Why conceal your station?" Evan bowed, neither arrogant nor apologetic. "To protect without distraction, to be near without burden. My duty was to Arian's safety, not my own renown." A hush fell. The answer was simple, but its sincerity rang true. Queen Celiora's eyes softened, though her lips pressed thin as she measured the room. Around them, nobles argued in hushed tones, some shocked into silence, others indignant. But Arian's heart beat loudest of all. He stepped closer, his voice clear. "Whether knight or prince, Evan has stood by me when others faltered. That is the truth you cannot deny." For a moment, silence reigned again. Evan looked at him, truly looked, and in that gaze the crowded hall melted away. It was Cerys who broke the stillness, though his voice lacked its earlier confidence. "A prince? From Aurelis?" He forced a laugh, though it trembled. "Then surely, your highness, you understand why such secrecy breeds mistrust. To hide your crown while standing so near ours, what intent does that serve?" But his protest fell flat. The room no longer hummed with agreement. Instead, nobles exchanged uncertain glances, torn between awe and calculation. The unmasking had changed everything. The ball continued, but the air was different now, charged with new weight. Eyes followed Evan not with disdain, but with reverence, suspicion, and fear all at once. Cerys withdrew, his pride wounded, though fury simmered beneath his calm mask. As the night waned, Arian and Evan stood side by side at the edge of the hall. "You chose to reveal yourself," Arian whispered. "Why now?" Evan's lips curved faintly, not cold, but resolute. "Because no man belittles me before you, not while I still breathe." Arian's chest tightened, warmth flooding his heart. He lowered his gaze for only a moment, lest the hall see too much. "Then stand by me, Evan Velthorn. Not as knight or prince, but as the one I trust above all." And in the eyes of the court, under the weight of 1,000 whispers, they stood united. The ballroom of Lysandra still shimmered with candlelight, though the air no longer carried music but whispers. The revelation of Evan Velthorn's true identity had broken over the assembly like a storm. Nobles who once dismissed him as a wandering knight now regarded him with awe, suspicion, and no small measure of fear. Arian stood at his side, gaze steady, though the weight of 100 eyes pressed on him. He did not waver. Instead, he moved closer, as if his presence alone could shield Evan from the ripple of doubt spreading through the court. At the high dais, King Renard rose to his full height. The golden crest of Lysandra glimmered upon his robes, and his voice carried above the murmur. "Evan Velthorn," he declared, tone deep and measured. "So it is true. You are the heir of Aurelius." Evan inclined his head, every motion dignified. "I am, Your Majesty. I did not intend for my name to be a weapon tonight, but I will not allow insult or falsehood to strike without answer." His calm poise silenced many, though not all. From among the nobles, Lord Cerys stepped forward again. His handsome face bore the faintest trace of a smile, sharp as a blade concealed in silk. "A revelation most astonishing, yet I cannot help but ask, why would the heir of Aurelius hide behind the guise of a mere knight? Unless," his eyes narrowed faintly, "unless his claim is less than he declares." Gasps ran through the crowd, but Evan's expression remained unbroken. Arian's hand tightened at his side. He longed to speak, to silence Cerys with one sharp command, but Evan's quiet strength held him back. "Careful, my lord," Evan said evenly. "I need not cloak myself in grand words. My name, my crest, and the seal I bear speak truer than any whisper." A hush followed. Slowly, he drew from his cloak a slender chain, upon which hung a silver medallion embossed with the rising sun of Aurelius. Its light caught in the chandeliers, undeniable and pure. The room stirred. Some nobles bowed at once, acknowledging the truth. Others hesitated, unwilling to yield their doubts so quickly. But the eyes that mattered most were those of King Renard and Queen Celiora. The queen leaned forward, her gentle face marked by curiosity and gravity alike. "So it is true," she murmured. "Aurelius' son walks once more among us." Arian lifted his chin proudly. "And not as a stranger, mother. He has stood by me when danger shadowed my steps. He has proven his loyalty in deeds greater than any title could demand." The king studied Evan long, then inclined his head. "Then the word of Lysandra's heir joins yours, Evan Velthorn. You shall be treated with the respect your name commands." A breath of relief seemed to pass through the chamber, yet the murmur of politics had already begun. Alliances, rivalries, and possibilities twisted in the minds of the courtiers like threads of silk. Cerys, however, bowed with deliberate grace. "Of course, your majesties. If such is the truth, then we are honored to welcome Aurelius' heir. Forgive my boldness." His smile remained, but his eyes betrayed the storm beneath. Evan met the look with calm steel, unshaken. Later, as the ball slowly unraveled into smaller gatherings, Evan and Arian slipped away into one of the palace balconies. The night air was cool, filled with the faint scent of roses from the gardens below. Arian leaned against the stone rail, exhaling softly. You've shaken half the court to its core. They'll talk of nothing else for weeks. Evan stepped beside him, the moonlight tracing silver into his dark hair. Better that truth be spoken now than festering in silence. I did not wish to carry this weight in secret forever. Arian glanced at him, a rare smile flickering across his lips. I thought you only came to Aurelis seeking peace. Instead, you've set every noble tongue aflame. And yet, Evan said gently, the only voice that matters to me is yours. The words were quiet, but they struck deeper than any proclamation in the hall. Arian's heart stirred, warmth rushing unbidden to his cheeks. Evan. For a moment, silence hung between them, filled only by the distant murmur of the ball. The stars stretched wide above, vast and endless, as if blessing their closeness. Then Arian reached out, fingers brushing against Evan's hand where it rested on the railing. It was a simple touch, almost nothing at all, but Evan turned his palm upward, letting their hands fit together as though they had always belonged. No declarations were needed. The night itself seemed to seal what words could not. Inside, the court reeled with new questions. What would Aurelis demand now that its heir had stepped into the light? What role would Lysandra's prince play in the balance between kingdoms? Lord Cerys lingered longer than most, his eyes narrowed in thought. His pride had been wounded before all, and though he smiled and bowed, his heart whispered of vengeance yet to be sown. But on the balcony, none of this mattered. There, two young heirs stood hand in hand, steadying each other against the storm that awaited them. And though the world beyond whispered of politics and peril, in that quiet space their hearts spoke louder, words of loyalty, of hope, of something far stronger than titles. The palace had not known silence since the night of the ball. Courtiers filled the corridors with whispers, their silken shoes carrying secrets as swiftly as the wind. The name Evan Velthorn was on every tongue, but so too was another, Lord Cerys. He had smiled and bowed when the truth was revealed, but the mask he wore was cracking. Whispers followed him like shadows. His challenge to Evan, spoken before the throne, was remembered now not as boldness, but as insult. In the council chamber, King Renard sat at the head of the long table, Queen Celiora at his side. Around them, the high nobles of Lysandra gathered, their expressions tense. Evan and Arian stood together, steady before the weight of so many eyes. It seems, began Duke Alvarin, a stern man with silver hair, that Lord Cerys has been less than loyal in his ambitions. The words stirred the room. Cerys, seated further down, raised his chin with practiced calm. Ambition is no crime, my lord. Every noble seeks to serve Lysandra in strength. To misread loyalty as rivalry is a dangerous folly. Arian's eyes narrowed. Then how do you answer the reports of your men, found lurking near the outer gates the very night of the masked festival? Cerys's lips curved faintly. Mere coincidence. My guards patrol often, as is their duty. But murmurs rippled through the chamber. Not all were convinced. Evan stepped forward then, his voice calm but cutting. Coincidence also placed your carriage near the old market street when Arian was attacked weeks ago, did it not? Gasps filled the room. Arian turned sharply toward Evan. This was the first time he had spoken of that suspicion aloud. Cerys's eyes flashed, though his smile remained fixed. You accuse me on shadows and guesses, Lord Velthorn. Be wary, for words spoken without proof can wound more than blades. Then let proof speak, said a new voice. From the chamber doors, a guard entered, carrying a bundle wrapped in cloth. He knelt before the king and unfurled it. Inside lay a dagger of polished steel, its hilt engraved with the crest of House Cerys. A chill swept the council. The weapon had been recovered from the very site where assassins once struck at Prince Arian. The mask upon Lord Cerys's face faltered. My lord? King Renard's tone was iron. What answer have you to this? For the first time, words did not flow easily from Cerys's tongue. He bowed low, his voice a velvet thread stretched too thin. A weapon can be stolen, Your Majesty. Many would wish to see me framed. But the room's silence told its truth. Nobles who once courted his favor now pulled back, unwilling to stand too close to a sinking ship. Later, in the quiet of the gardens, Arian and Evan walked beneath lanterns lit against the night. The weight of the council lingered, yet the cool air brought them a measure of calm. Arian exhaled, brushing a hand along a hedge of white roses. For so long, Cerys was a voice at every feast, every council. To see him cornered like this, it feels strange, as if a pillar I leaned on was made of sand. Evan walked beside him, steady. A man like Cerys builds his strength not on loyalty, but on shadows. Sooner or later, shadows fade in the light. Arian glanced at him, a smile tugging faintly at his lips. You always know what to say, don't you? Evan returned the look, softer now. Only because I know who I'm speaking to. Their steps slowed, and for a moment the palace seemed far away. Lantern light cast a warm glow over them, and in the quiet, Arian felt the storm within him ease. You stood by me in there, he said quietly. Not as Aurelius's heir, not as a knight, but as you. Evan's gaze held his, steady and unwavering. And I always will. A silence followed, tender and unspoken, before Arian laughed lightly to break the weight of it. If the court saw us like this, they'd start writing their own tales. Then let them, Evan said simply. Back within the palace, Cerys lingered alone in the shadows of his chamber. The mask of composure had slipped, leaving only fury beneath, his hands clenched at the memory of the dagger laid bare before the king. The nobles were turning, his power was fraying, and all because of him, Evan Velthorn. In the quiet, Cerys swore a vow: if whispers could not unmake the heir of Aurelius, then sharper measures would. But for the first time, he knew the cost would be greater than before. The noose of consequence had tightened, and even he could feel it. The council chamber of Lysandra blazed with torchlight, shadows flickering along its gilded walls. Nobles stood packed in rows, their voices hushed with unease. At the center, Lord Cerys knelt on the marble floor, chains clasped around his wrists. King Renard's gaze was hard as stone, his voice echoing. Lord Cerys of House Taenar, you stand accused of treachery against the crown and of conspiring against the heirs of Lysandra and Aurelius. Do you deny it? Cerys raised his chin, his once confident face pale but still defiant. I deny nothing that has not been proven. I sought only strength for Lysandra, a path you all were too blind to take. Queen Celiora's voice cut like ice. Strength bought with betrayal is weakness, not power. Murmurs filled the chamber. The nobles had once courted Cerys's favor. Now they turned their eyes from him as though his shadow carried plague. Arian stood beside his father, but his hand twitched faintly, betraying nerves. Evan, ever steady, placed his hand lightly over Arian's wrist where no one else could see. The touch was fleeting, yet it calmed him. King Renard's voice rose again. For your crimes, House Taenar is stripped of rank and holdings. You are to be imprisoned until judgment of the realm may decide your final fate. Remove him. Guards seized Cerys. He struggled once, then stilled, pride his only shield. His eyes darted to Evan, blazing with resentment. You may have won the court, Velthorn, but you have no place here. You will never— Enough, Renard thundered. Cerys was dragged from the chamber. His words fell away, swallowed by the silence that followed. For the first time in months, the hall felt lighter, as though a storm had passed. Later that night, the palace was quieter. Lanterns glowed in the gardens, casting soft halos of light against the roses. Arian slipped from the hall, his thoughts heavy despite victory. Evan found him near the reflecting pool, where moonlight shimmered across the water. He did not speak at first, only joined him in the stillness. It should feel like a triumph, Arian murmured, staring at his reflection. Cerys can no longer harm us, but all I feel is tired. That's because you never wished for power games or vengeance, Evan replied gently. Your heart doesn't find joy in tearing others down. That's what makes you different. Arian turned to him, his expression softening. And what of you? You revealed your truth before all of Lysandra, risking their scorn. Wasn't that exhausting? Evan's lips curved faintly. It was, but then you looked at me as though I wasn't a stranger, as though I was already where I belonged. Silence lingered, filled with the rustle of leaves and the song of night insects. Slowly, Arian reached out, brushing a strand of Evan's long platinum hair back where it had fallen loose. You never belonged anywhere else, he whispered. Evan's breath stilled at the touch. His hand rose, almost hesitant, before resting over Arian's. Do you realize what you do to me? Arian's cheeks warmed, but he held his gaze. Perhaps the same thing you do to me. Their closeness was fragile, tender, yet full of an unspoken promise. Evan bent his head slightly, his voice barely above the wind. When all the world doubted me, you were the one who saw more. I've been called cold, unfeeling, but with you I cannot help but care. And I, Arian said softly, thought I would never find someone who understood me. Not as a prince, but as myself. Yet here you are. The moonlight bathed them in silver. Arian leaned forward, resting his forehead against Evan's shoulder. Evan's arms encircled him without hesitation, strong yet gentle. They stood like that, a quiet vow formed in the embrace. I don't need festivals or crowns to bind me to you, Evan whispered. All I need is this. Arian smiled against him. Then keep it, and keep me. They drew apart only slightly, just enough for their eyes to meet again. No words followed. Instead, the world stilled as their closeness deepened, not in passion, but in certainty. Fingers laced together, and in that moment, they sealed what words could not. When dawn broke, the palace stirred with new life. Rumors spread swiftly. Cerys had been imprisoned, and his power broken. Yet more powerful than rumor was the sight of Aurelius's heir walking beside Lysandra's, their steps aligned as though the path had always been one. In the throne room, King Renard and Queen Celiora looked upon the two young men with quiet pride. My son, Renard said to Arian, I have seen the strength you have gained, not alone, but together. Celiora's eyes softened on Evan. And you, Prince of Aurelis, you have proven that your loyalty is not to titles, but to the one you chose to protect. Arian glanced at Evan, their hands brushing as though even in the presence of so many, they could not be apart. Renard rose. Then let it be spoken. Aurelius and Lysandra shall walk a path of unity. The time will come soon when vows will bind you not only in affection, but in rule. The court erupted in murmurs of approval. Nobles bowed low, and for the first time there was no doubt. Two kingdoms were ready to join, not by conquest, but by love. That night, beneath the quiet canopy of stars, Arian and Evan returned once more to the gardens. They spoke little, for words seemed less important than the simple knowledge that they were no longer alone. Hand in hand, they walked into the future that awaited them, the weight of fear behind them, and only promise ahead. The quiet days after Cerys's punishment felt like dawn breaking after a storm. The palace of Lysandra, once filled with hushed tension, now brimmed with gentler laughter, lighter steps, and music that carried no undertone of suspicion. For Arian, the weight pressing on his chest since the attempted betrayal had finally lifted, and in that freedom, his heart turned even more surely toward Evan. Arian often found Evan in the gardens at dawn, when the first light turned the marble courtyards gold. On one such morning, he stopped in his tracks. Evan stood with his hair loose, silken white strands cascading past his waist. A single pin of Aurelius gold held a small portion back, but most swayed freely in the wind. He looked like a painting come alive. You're awake earlier than the guards, Arian teased softly, stepping closer. Evan turned, his eyes brighter than the sunrise. Habit. In Aurelius, dawn was the only time I could escape the duties waiting at my door. Now I find myself chasing it again, though this view is far more rewarding. Arian's lips curved faintly. A knight's words, smooth as always. Not a knight, Evan corrected gently, voice dropping low. Not anymore, just a man who wishes to remain by your side. The words warmed Arian's chest more than sunlight ever could. Later that day, The two sat with King Renard and Queen Celiora in the council chamber. Plans for the upcoming royal union had begun, and though Arian tried to keep his composure, his pulse quickened each time Evan's hand brushed his under the table. "Both kingdoms have expressed support," Renard said, studying the scroll before him. "But the celebration must honor not only Lysandra's tradition, but Aurelius's as well. We are uniting more than two men. We are binding two nations." Queen Celiora's smile softened the formality. "But let us not forget, it is first a wedding. Love must be seen, felt, cherished. The rest will follow." Arian glanced at Evan, whose gaze lingered on him with quiet devotion. For once, the politics did not overwhelm him. With Evan there, even endless duties felt bearable. That evening, as they strolled beneath lanterns strung through the palace courtyard, Arian slowed his steps. "Do you ever wonder if this is too fast? If the people will accept us?" Evan reached for his hand openly. "I wondered once, but each day with you proves it is not speed that matters, but certainty. And I am certain, Arian, more than anything." Silence stretched between them, not heavy, but tender. The lantern light painted Evan's features soft, his expression steady as if carved from truth itself. "You are certain," Arian echoed, almost in awe. "I am," Evan whispered. Then, leaning closer, he added, "And I will prove it, every day that follows." For the first time in years, Arian laughed without restraint, the sound echoing against the garden walls. The fears of kingdoms, of thrones, of enemies, all felt small compared to the warmth in his hand. Together, they began to dream aloud, of vows beneath banners of two kingdoms, of music that blended Aurelius strings and Lysandra flutes, of gardens blooming with roses and lilies. It was not only a wedding they were planning, it was a new beginning. The morning of the wedding dawned clear, as though the heavens themselves approved. Bells rang from Lysandra's highest towers, their echoes drifting across the kingdom. Crowds gathered beyond the palace gates, their cheers a chorus of unity. Inside, Arian stood before a tall mirror. His robe was white, threaded with silver, flowing like liquid light. His long hair, wavy and shining, was tied high with a jeweled pin, strands falling gracefully over his shoulders. He looked every bit a prince, but his heart pounded with something far more human. Nervous anticipation. A knock sounded. Evan entered, dressed in robes of pale blue with gold embroidery, the colors of Aurelius. His long hair, too, was tied in the traditional style, elegant yet simple, a circlet resting upon his brow. For a long breath, they simply looked at one another. Arian's voice faltered. "You look like a man about to wed the most beautiful soul I've ever known?" Evan finished, a small smile curving his lips. Heat spread to Arian's cheeks, and he turned slightly. "You never miss a chance for charm. Not when it's true." Evan stepped closer, fingers brushing against Arian's sleeve, grounding him. "We stand on the edge of something greater than ourselves. And still, my only thought is you." Their moment was brief, for the ceremony awaited. The grand hall had been transformed, walls draped in banners of silver and azure, floors strewn with petals. Nobles from both Aurelius and Lysandra filled the chamber, their gazes turned toward the dais, where King Renard and Queen Celiora stood to bless the union. Beside them were Aurelius's sovereigns, Evan's parents, King Aldric and Queen Maris. Dignified, proud, yet softened by joy, they nodded at their son. When Arian and Evan walked forward, hand in hand, a hush fell across the hall. It was not disapproval that silenced the crowd, but reverence. The sight of two heirs, once separated by borders, now joined by love, was more powerful than any speech. Renard's voice carried strong. "Today we do not merely bind Lysandra and Aurelius. We witness the promise of two souls, stronger together than apart. Let no shadow, no enemy, undo what is built this day." The vows that followed were simple, spoken from the heart. Arian. "I vow to share my strength with you, Evan, and to shelter your heart as my own." Evan. "And I vow to walk every road with you, Arian, through peace or storm, through crown or silence, until the last light fades. When their hands clasped, sealed in golden cords, the hall erupted with cheers. Bells tolled again, louder, brighter. Later, in the garden beneath glowing lanterns, the two shared a quieter moment. Music and laughter filled the air, yet they stood apart, beneath a tree heavy with blossoms. "It feels unreal," Arian murmured. "It feels inevitable," Evan corrected softly. He lifted Arian's hand, pressing his lips to it with gentle reverence. "From the moment I first saw you, beneath Aurelius's walls, I knew. The rest was only a path to arrive here." Arian exhaled, his heart tight but full. "You are impossible." "And yours," Evan replied without hesitation. As the night stretched on, torches lit the garden paths, and fireflies drifted like stars around them. The celebration roared, but for them, time slowed. They leaned closer, words fading, until the world felt made only of two hearts beating in rhythm. For the people, it was the beginning of an age of unity. But for Arian and Evan, it was something simpler, something far more precious. An eternal promise, sealed not by crowns, but by love.